Hi everyone, Raphael Harry here, and you're listening to White Label American, a podcast where we hear stories from an immigrant or two, sometimes more. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we officially begin, I would like to remind you, if you have not subscribed to the website, www.whitelabelamerican.com, please do. Remember to share. You can go up there and buy our merch if you want to support us. You can also donate, as low as much as you can. And if you really enjoy what we do, you can join our Patreon. And for as low as $3, hey, you can support us that way. Or you can do the Jeff Bezos thing and give us as much as you want, up to 100 million. We won't say no. Hey, I'm black and I'm bald. So why not? Do that. We won't say no to that amount. Dollars, pounds, sterling, euros, we'll take it. If you want to give bitcoins, we can negotiate that, but we'll prefer dollars and pounds, sterling. Just give us the real cash, all right? All righty. Enough of that. Keep the support coming in. We appreciate everyone who shares and, puts word about us out there. And don't forget to write positive reviews, okay? Thank you very much. So, today's recommendation. I just saw this movie called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I highly recommend it. I'm not going to read the synopsis because I believe if you just go by the synopsis, you can't just rely on it. It's not a literal word by word of the synopsis, but it has everything from martial arts to a great message. But for me, the biggest message I took from the movie is kindness is a superpower. And the way they get you to that message is beautifully done. I cried watching the movie, but it's not just that I cried, it's that the movie touched me in a way like Black Panther touched me, because I think everyone will get something that they want to get from the movie. So watch it, check it out, and it's also the month for our Asian, to recognize our Asian brethren, our Asian and Pacific brethren. So support, and it's an indie movie, and there are a lot of great movies out there, but this is a great movie that has a mostly Asian cast. So with that being said, let's meet someone who I am very honored to have on the podcast. She is one of, when I say illustrious guests that I've had, this is one of the most illustrious guests to have appeared on this show. She's an internationally known transformational speaker, a teacher, and a healer. She's a wife, an aspiring mother, and entrepreneur. There's a lot to this woman that I've not even scratched the surface, because if I keep going, we'll probably spend 15 minutes just on the intro. But I'm honored and I'm so happy to introduce someone who I'm always inspired to listen to and I look up to when it comes to podcasting and creating in general. So welcome on the show, Latrice, Sampson, Richards. How are you doing today?
Wow, that was quite the introduction. I hope I live up to all of that. That was really nice.
Oh, you
Um,
more than live up to it. Trust me. I've followed you around for a little bit, not in a stalking style, but
yeah.
otherwise I would have moved to New Orleans. So,
I actually don't live in New Orleans anymore. I
oh,
live
good.
in South Florida now, but I am from New Orleans.
All right.
Yeah.
So, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here with you and getting to just kind of have a conversation with you today. So, it's been busy, 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 but I wanted to make sure that I make some time for you. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, and I'm honored to have you here. So, let's dive in and go to the origin story of Latrice. You have beautiful names, and you come from a part of the country that I'm always fascinated by. So, can you give us the story behind your names and what are the meanings?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So my maiden name is Latrice Sampson. I was born a Sampson. And my first name actually, my mother's best friend, her name was Patricia. And when my mother was pregnant with me, she was trying to figure out what she was going to name me. And so we call her Nanny Pat because she's my sister's godmother.
Okay.
And so we call her Nanny Pat. So Nanny Pat said, uh, why don't you name her Patrice? And my mama, she didn't really like Patrice. She said, but let me see what it looked like with an L in front of it. And that's how she
Wow.
got to Latrice. She liked it. She thought it was pretty. And that's how she got to Latrice. And my whole life, I was the only Latrice I knew. I knew a girl named Latrice, but her
Wow.
name was spelled different and
Yeah.
sounded different, but people used to get our names mixed up. But
Oh, wow.
I actually never really knew what my name meant until recently. We did an episode of the podcast of stories all around us, and one of the episodes is called "What Is in a Name," and it is about excuse me, it's about names,
Yeah.
and the connection that we have to our names. And one of our guests, she encouraged me to look up the meaning of my name, and I want to say it was nobility.
Nobility. Hmm.
Yeah, royalty and nobility, which, I'm a Leo, so I feel like that tracks.
That's
Yeah,
right.
all my fellow Leos out there. I mean, we royal? Aren't
That's right.
we
That's
kings and
true.
queens out here? And so yeah, so and then my maiden name is Sampson. And that actually was a typo
Mm.
on my dad's birth certificate. Is how we ended up Sampson. My original family name is Sansom, Sansom.
Wow.
And but they spelled it wrong on my daddy birth certificate, and then so that's what that is. But we have a very strong connection to our name, which is why when I got married, because I'm a Richards now, I got married in 2016, and I decided not to hyphenate,
Hmm.
but also I decided to keep my maiden name. And so I moved forward with Sampson Richards. So my official last name is Sampson Richards, no hyphen.
Yeah.
Um, because I had a lot of pride I still have a lot of pride in my last name. My daddy raised us that, you're a Sampson, and that means something. Like
Mm.
if when people hear Sampson, people automatically know what kind of person they're dealing with. They automatically know what your character is. They know what kind of family you come from, and they know that, you're a force to be reckoned with. And so we have a lot of pride in our last name. And I've been very blessed because the Richards family in Jamaica, y'all know I'm Jamaican by marriage. And the Richards family is a great family as well. And they are raised with a lot of pride in their name as well. And
Yeah.
so it just really fit because I was able to kind of take that in. And I really do live by, your name is all you have
True. I
at
believe in
the end
that
of the
too.
day.
Hmm.
Your name is all you have. And so it's important to me that when my name enters a room, whether I'm there or not, I want my name to make people smile. I
Mm.
want my name to make people feel good about themselves or, about me, about their interaction with me. I want to make sure that, years and years and years and years and years from now, when I'm no longer here, and people think back on that one time that they met Latrice Sampson Richards, and it just put a smile on their face. That's my goal in this life, and so that's how I move.
It's a beautiful goal, and um, it's a goal that I think I have a similar goal when it comes to names because I may have been in junior high, the equivalent of our junior high school back in Nigeria. I think it was one of my teachers or maybe one of my neighbors. So it was someone older that had said, "Your name is you is what you really own. The thing you own the most." I'm paraphrasing, but it's what you 100% there's a guarantee that you own is your name, and
Mhm.
that is what people can either bank on or count on. And if they can't count on your name, then yeah, that's so it's your integrity is tied to your name
It
in the
is.
long run. And I know that it was well. Then I was trying to chase it. There was a girl I was trying to chase, but she apparently referred to people were talking about me. I was new to the town and the school. Yeah, I
Mhm.
transferred from a different state and region, and I did not like that area because I was from a minority tribe, and everybody there was Yoruba mostly. Yoruba, it was a Yoruba area, and so now I'm like, oh, I don't really mess with you people and that kind of thing. But the truth is that I think it was my way of feeling like an outcast without, I didn't have the words then. So you're now in a position where even though I was coming from a place where I was also a minority, but it wasn't like something that I had noticed that I was
Mhm.
like a minority because there were bigger numbers of other minorities around. But now it
Yeah.
was like really in my face that I was the minority. And now there's like the big number of people from one tribe just dominating everywhere to the point where your English classes were even in their language. So I was
Mhm.
very annoyed about something like that. But when I wasn't around, I didn't know what people were saying about me. And
Mhm.
this girl who I was trying to go after, I was trying to date. For some reason, I don't even know how the conversation got there, but she was like, "Oh, when you're not around, people say you're cool." And I think that was the first time I was like, "Oh, people find me cool." And yeah, but I felt good for the rest of that. I just remember that feeling good, like,
Mhm.
oh, so there are people who find me cool, and maybe I shouldn't be
Mhm.
trying to butt heads with people because to me, I thought I was always butting heads and clashing and that
Mhm.
kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I think that may have, in a way, helped change my attitude towards certain
Yeah.
people because I think I just looked at most of them as my enemies
Mhm.
from day one. And maybe that led to a crack. One of the because at different times in my life, I have not even realized that how certain actions created who I will end up becoming. But that may have been one of the cracks too. Because at
Yeah.
first, the person who will become my best friend in that school will come from that tribe. Otherwise, all people were my friends were outside as well, from different tribes, but none of the majority Yoruba. So I didn't date Yoruba. I didn't try to be friends with Yoruba. But I was becoming an extremist without realizing
Mm.
it until
Yeah.
she told me that the Yoruba people found me cool. But it
Yeah.
was that they heard my name was being spoken in a cool way, in a cool manner, and that began to change me. Even though I thought
Yeah.
I was clashing with people. So yeah.
It's so interesting. I'm a therapist by trade.
Hmm.
I've been a therapist for the last 11 years, licensed in the states of Louisiana and Florida. And I always have to give this disclaimer.
Yeah.
I am a therapist, but if you're listening to this, I am not your therapist. So anything that I say right now is not directed to you, but if you connect with it, you might want to talk to a therapist about that. But it's so interesting because what you're describing, I think, is something that it is really just a part of the human experience, right?
Mm.
Because so there's this philosopher, this theorist in the field named Maslow, Robert
Oh
Maslow.
yes.
Yes, and so he created this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he says it's kind of like a inverted, it's like a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that we all have, as human beings, we have these basic needs, or these needs that must be met in order to, get to this place of self-actualization, where it's kind of like you're able to stand in your fullness and you're able to like really intentionally care about other people and things like that. Like it's a whole process. And at the bottom of that list is basic survival needs, food, water, clothing, shelter, safety is a
Yes.
basic need, which I think we forget a lot of times. But the very next tier is the need for love and belonging, which essentially, I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but essentially equates to acceptance and
Mm.
validation from your peers,
True.
right? Or more so, validation from your community, right? As human beings, we need to feel like we are a part of something that is bigger than ourselves. We need to feel like we are a part of a community. And so when we struggle, when we enter a new community, a community that is not familiar to us, whether that's a new school, a new job, a new friend group, with a new country, a new city, whatever it might be, we don't really know that community yet. And so we don't know what we need to do to get that acceptance from that community, or if that community will be willing to accept us. And so we can a lot of times put up these walls because we expect that the community is not going to receive us.
True.
And we expect that we're going to be isolated. And so sometimes just like, so what that girl did, the girl that you was chasing, she must have been cute too,
Oh yeah.
because she sounded like she was smart. So what the young lady that you were chasing, what she did for you is she gave you acceptance.
Mm.
She gave you confirmation that you belong to that group. And that allowed you to let your guard down and let people really get to know you, and it allowed you to feel safe. It allowed you to feel comfortable, and it allowed you to kind of flourish. And I think, I always say, people, if you ever meet somebody, that says, I don't need nobody,
Mm.
right? I'm
Yeah.
I'm good by myself. I don't need nobody. They lying.
It's true.
And more than lying to you, they lying to themselves. They're trying to convince themselves that they don't need anybody, because it is human nature. It is a actual human need for love and belonging. Human beings need other human beings. Period. There's no exception to that rule.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because I have also done that. I don't need nobody thing, and yeah, it was also a therapy that I came to the realization that yeah, I'm not that person. Yeah, I was lying
Mhm.
to myself. So it's
Yeah, trying to
it's
trying
it.
to protect yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So staying with your childhood, um, we've already mentioned the the state, but now we're going to come down to the city, to the local area. So, can you
Mhm.
introduce us to your place of birth and what childhood was like for you growing up?
Yes, so I'm from New Orleans, but if anybody from New Orleans is actually listening to this, whenever you're from a big city, a well-known
Sorry, I
city,
said state,
or
a big city. I meant, yeah, my
yeah,
bad.
yeah. No, well, yeah, Louisiana is the state, which
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize.
it's true.
Louisiana is the state, New Orleans is the city. And so I'm from New Orleans, born and raised. My family is from New Orleans. My mother's side of the family is multiple generations in New Orleans. We New Orleanians through and through. And my dad actually was born in Mississippi, and moved to New Orleans when he was about 3 years old with his parents and his sister. And so, but I just want to give the caveat for anybody that's actually from New Orleans and understands the geography there. I'm actually born, the actual city that I was born in is Marrero.
Morero.
Marrero,
Hmm.
yes,
I
Marrero,
knew I was going to get
Louisiana.
some names. I just love hearing names from that part of America. It's like,
Yes, yes. So Marrero is where I was born, which is excuse me, which is New Orleans. It's a suburb of New Orleans. So it's not New Orleans proper. It's kind of the outskirts of New Orleans. But I always say I got the best of both worlds, because my both of my parents grew up in the city of New Orleans.
Okay.
And but when they, when they got married, my daddy was in the military, he was in the army, long before I was born. But when they first got married, my dad was in the army. They lived in Germany for a little bit, and then they came back, and they purchased a house. And at the time, Marrero was, sticks, sticks and rocks. And so they built the house, in a brand new subdivision. Nothing else really existed over there at the time. And they raised us in Marrero. But I always say I got the best of both worlds because I feel like I kind of got the chill
Mm-hmm.
of kind of growing up in the suburbs. It was very quiet on my block growing up. There was a lot of kids around, so we always had people to play with. It was very, very safe. I grew up as a part of a community. We went to. I grew up Catholic. I don't identify as Catholic anymore, but I did was raised in a Black Catholic church, which a lot of people don't realize is a thing. There is such a
Yeah.
thing as Black Catholic, okay? Um, and it's a Black church just like any other Black church, but we Catholic, that we just do Catholic things. So that's that. And so the church had a school, and I went to that school from 3 years old all the way through eighth grade.
Mm.
So I grew up with a lot of stability. My parents, still to this day, live in the same home that they brought me home from the hospital in,
Oh wow.
which the hospital is literally around the corner from the house,
Oh.
so so they had the same phone number, up until probably about 5 to 7 years ago. They finally got rid of the phone number. That was the same phone number from the day they moved in the house,
Oh
So
wow.
like I had a lot of stability growing up, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But I
Wait.
always,
I got to jump in there.
yeah,
The
yeah.
phone number that just got me curious. So when your parents changed that phone number, because I'm pretty sure you had that number burnt into your memory already.
Oh
Did,
yeah,
did you have
yeah,
a
yeah.
problem now remembering or adjusting to the new number
They no, they actually they don't have a landline anymore. They
anymore?
don't have a
Oh,
house phone anymore. Yeah,
okay.
they gave it up, because nobody was calling them.
Oh.
And I remember a couple years ago, I was like, "Mama, why do y'all still have a house phone? Who is calling you on this house phone? Nobody is calling you on this house phone." So they finally went on and let it go. And they
uh,
just have their mobile phones now.
okay.
But even that, like both of my parents have been having their same mobile phone number since they got cell phones. They've
Uh,
never had a different number.
that kind of
So
sounds like me.
yeah, me too. I mean, what I'm changing my number for? I never understood people that change their number every 5 minutes. I think I have had three mobile numbers in my life since I started, got my first cell phone, right after
Yeah.
I graduated from high school.
Yeah, I
I've
think
had three
I think same
numbers.
with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and each change was for a specific reason. The first time I changed my number because I really needed somebody to stop calling me. And that I couldn't figure out how to do that at the time other than to change my number and make sure that they did not get that number. And that worked. And then the second time I changed my number, I think it was because I don't know why it was. Maybe that again, maybe I just needed somebody to stop calling me. But that was it. I've been rolling with my current number because I learned how to block people.
Yep.
And so since I learned how to block, listen, I don't play with my spirit and my energy. I'm very, very particular about who I allow in my space.
Yep.
And I will block your ass in a heartbeat. I don't feel no kind of way
That's
about it.
it.
I will block you.
That's it.
Period.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think mine was my very first cell phone was a hand me down from my aunt, one of my aunts. She upgraded because we started having cell phones for the whole public in Nigeria after 1999 or in
Mm,
1999. And by the time some of us could afford it, I think my aunt was, but you were attached to the carrier that you got your cell phone from.
mm,
So in 2003, my aunt moved to like the biggest carrier. She got a line from them, and you couldn't transfer your number to that company. So you had to
mm.
get, because each company, I think, yeah, they had the codes where each company had a certain code given to them. So
Yeah,
if you got a number from them, your numbers began with their code. So there was no transferring of numbers. So it was like,
yeah,
yeah, you get a new SIM card, new number. So she was like, all right, you have my old phone. So I had to deal with a whole bunch of people calling, like, let me speak to Monica. I'm like, no, no, I'm not Monica. Why is the man answering her phone? I'm like, nah,
yeah.
it's not, it's me. I'm my nephew, but it's no longer a phone. So dealt with that for a couple of years. And then I moved to America, got my first cell phone was my elder brother's cell phone, which I understood later on why he handed it over to me because yeah, he troubled too. So apparently, people say we sound alike, even though he was born here and left when he was age 4, and then came back in his early 20s, and then it was like almost 15 years before we reunite.
Mm.
And with my accent being fresh from Nigeria, even after I said hello, people be like, Kenneth,
Yeah.
yeah, yo, so you meet me here, and I'm like, no, I'm not Kenneth. I'm his brother. Why you sound like that? You sound like
Yeah.
Kenneth, but you sound like Kenneth. I'm like, no, I don't think we sound alike. I
Yeah.
think we are different. And there's no, we don't. And there are people who were cussing me out like, Kenneth, why you playing this trick on me? Stop playing tricks on me. I'm like, yes. So as soon as I joined the Navy and left, that was the first thing I was getting, a cell phone. Got a cell phone. Like, yeah, there are people need
Yeah.
to stop calling. I'm done with this. No, no more. And then I had to deploy. When I left for Bahrain, I ended my line, and then I came back from Bahrain. So I got a different number in Bahrain that I will give up by the time I was coming back from Bahrain. So I guess somebody had to deal with who's. I want to speak to
Yeah.
Rafi.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got my revenge
Yeah.
finally.
If I ever change my number, I feel bad for whoever get this number
uh,
after me because I've had it for so long.
yeah.
But I used to do military counseling before really before my podcasting and stuff like that. I used to do military counseling, and so I never went to Bahrain, but I've heard amazing things about Bahrain.
Oh, that changed my
But
life big time.
yeah, yeah, I
A
heard it's
lovely
like really
place.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yes.
I did go to Okinawa.
Oh,
I lived
oh.
in Okinawa for a
Save that.
year.
We'll save that for a little bit. We're
Okay.
coming to that. We're
Okay.
coming to that.
Okay.
But before
Okay.
we jump forward, we're still staying with your childhood. One
Yes.
question, which it might have more than one answer. What do you consider your favorite childhood memory? And you can give us more than one example.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a deep question, I know, or a big question, but it's one of my favorites to ask.
My favorite childhood memory.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll say two things. So one, I think that so I'm the youngest of three.
Oh,
I'm the
same here.
baby of my family. And I think it wasn't until maybe like the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years, I think I really started to realize that there was a lot about there was a lot of moments in my childhood that I wasn't really present for,
Oh,
meaning not necessarily like I was there physically and we have the photos,
yeah.
but the photos are how I remember that I had that moment. Like there was a company picnic that we went to for my mom's job, I remember. And so we have this photo. I do vaguely remember being at the picnic,
Okay.
but I don't really remember that moment. But we have this photo of my sister and I in these kind of quasi matching outfits from that picnic. And that photo kind of brings me back to the little bits and pieces that I do remember of that day. And so there's a lot of those kind of experiences for me growing up. I think that, I've always been like a creative child, and I've always, kind of been like head in the clouds,
Mm-hmm.
like I am a hugger, like I'm a hugger, and I'm a creative, and I'm always just in another world thinking about, oh, how cool would it be if this, and how cool would it be? And I think as a child, my imagination would kind of get away from me a lot of times. And so I wasn't always like present and in the moment. So like
Yep.
in my adult life, I spend a lot of time, I do allow myself to be where, wherever my imagination wants to go, but I also am very intentional about being present and like remembering moments. Like my journey in podcasting has been, I mean, it's just I have no words, like it has been so much more than I ever could have anticipated. And I'm just getting started. I ain't even did nothing yet, for real.
Yeah.
And so, or at least not, what's on my list of shit to do. And so I'm very intentional about making sure that I am present for these moments, because I don't want to look back 10 years from now and feel like I've missed a whole chunk of my life, like I just wasn't present for that. And that came from my experience in childhood, in terms of like just not really feeling like there's a whole lot about my childhood that I remember.
Mm.
That being said, though, um, I do have moments and experiences that will forever be with me from my childhood,
Yeah.
and moments where I was very present. And those things are the things that matter the most to me growing up. And so one of those things, I would say my favorite thing, is my grandfather, and well, my grandparents, specific all of my grandparents, but specifically my paternal grandparents, so my daddy's
Yeah.
mother and father. My grandfather, his name was Johnny, and I called him Papa. That's my Papa. And so my Papa was, he was a surly old man. He was quiet most of the time. But when he spoke, he was either cracking a joke or being the life of the party, or he was, tumultuous and um, difficult, you
Mm.
know, and it's a very interesting juxtaposition, those things,
Yeah.
because whenever it came to me, he was soft and mushy, and just my grandfather was one of my favorite people, like, in life. My
Mm.
grandfather was one of my favorite people. And I got a little choked up just now thinking about my papa.
Mm.
And I got my flappy arms that come from Johnny. My grandfather he was a thin man, but he had a lot of loose skin on
Ah.
his arms in particular. And so my grandfather used to get a mason jar with sweet tea,
Okay.
and he would go out to the stoop on the front of the house. They lived in a fourplex. And so he would go out to the stoop on the front of the house, and he would sit on that stoop. And my grandfather knew everybody in that neighborhood. He would just sit there. They lived across the street from a school, and my grandmother was the candy lady. And so every morning before school, the kids would come in and, buy their candy for the school day.
Yeah.
And then when they got out of school, they would come in and buy their candy for the walk home. And so my grandfather knew everybody. He knew all of those kids. He knew all of the neighbors. Everybody knew Mr. Johnny. And so whenever I was over there, we would stay, we would a lot of times go spend summers with my grandparents, even though they was just across the river. That's what I was saying earlier. I got the calm of the suburb of Marrero, but
Yeah.
I still got the city of New Orleans because I was just as much raised in New Orleans as I was raised in Marrero,
Okay. Yeah.
because my entire family was in New Orleans. We was like the only ones.
Yeah.
Um, so he knew everybody, and I used to suck my thumb, and I've always been like an emotional child. I really thrive on human interaction, and specifically just love and connection, and I just I like to that closeness with
Mm.
another human being. And my grandfather was that for me, And so we used to sit on the stoop. He would sit on the stoop. I would sit on the step, and I would suck my thumb, and I would play with his skin. I would just play with the skin on his arm, and he would
Wow.
drink his tea, and everybody would come by, and they knew me because they knew him, and they knew I was his grandbaby, and wasn't nothing gonna happen to me because I was Johnny's grandbaby,
Yeah.
and wasn't nothing gonna happen. And those moments, like those are some of the strongest memories that I have.
Wow.
And those are some of the moments that, like I think I have flashbacks of those moments, like very, very fondly have flashbacks of those moments. Because, you know, my grandfather was a difficult man.
Mm.
He was a difficult man. He was a lot of times he was very mean to my grandmother, like, mean, very, very mean. Um, and as a child, you don't really understand those kind of things.
Yeah.
But then as you start to like become a teenager, you start to kind of see it differently. And my grandmother was uh she was not a soft woman because she was an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
She was the candy lady.
Yeah.
And she had a whole system. And we used to go, like, that's another strong memory. We used to go with my grandmother to the warehouse where she would buy her candy. And she had her buggy, and we would walk with her to go buy her candy. And she would price it out, and she would say, "Go and get a bag of them big bowls, and go get a bag of them, strawberry kisses or whatever it is." So, like, she was an entrepreneur, so she wasn't a soft woman
Mm.
in the least bit.
Yeah.
But she was soft spoken more often than not, you
Mm.
know. And so those kind of moments with my grandparents are like the moments that stick out to me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful memory. I wish I never met my grandparents, and uh, it's something that I always I have some part of me always feels envy for people who got to spend time with their grandparents, because
Mm.
it's something that part of me will, I know I never had that, and I'm glad that my daughter gets to enjoy have our own memories with our grandparents. She gets to enjoy that, so that's one thing that I'm grateful for. Um, and yeah, that's a great point that you made there. That just because your grandmother was soft spoken, doesn't mean she was a soft person. Doesn't mean she wasn't a strong person. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, when we tell the stories, we just say, "Oh, because someone was taking an abuse, just it means the person just weak, 100% weak," and we
Mm.
forget that that's not how it works.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
one of my favorite people in my family was an uncle of mine who unfortunately passed away pretty young, and when I was just becoming a young adult, he was one of the few people that really stood by me and was like, let this young man express himself, have his voice, and
Yeah.
A lot of people were more of the he needs to toe the line. If we all going to church, he must go to church to everybody. If we all doing this, he must do everything. Even though we knew those who were doing the bad stuff or the good stuff, and but it was like I didn't have money. The economic situations had changed, so there were favorites now, and I wasn't among the favorites anymore because the economic situation had changed. So it was like the moment I spoke out now, I became bad. But he knew that
Mm,
that wasn't the case. But I was just a young person like beginning to explore and ask
mhm.
questions, and he was like, "Yeah, let him ask questions."
Yeah.
So he was like my go-to person because I could vent, I could just, yeah, I really loved hanging out. And then he was a lawyer, he was a young man. Things were beginning to happen in his career. If he was still alive, he probably may have ended up being a governor or something. But they were cutting him then, and
Yeah.
but I think in a way, his death may have also created a crack in my system because he never took breaks. He
Mm.
was that hustle, because sometimes I'll show up at his house like 5:30 in the morning. He was like, "Yeah, we gotta move, we gotta move, we gotta move." Meetings, jumping here and there, and then he would show up home like maybe 10 at night, and I don't even know,
Yeah.
his kids barely saw him, his wife barely saw him. And but I loved the way he dressed. He was like, in my part of the country we say guy man. The guy man had the swagger. He had he had the
Mm.
flows. But I never saw him chasing women and that kind of thing. But he was the type that he didn't have to chase when women were throwing themselves at him, and he was like,
Yeah.
it was like he could just wave, get out of my face, kind of thing. But I don't know if he cheated. I don't. That wasn't the point. But there were things that happened that I chose not to see because I was
Mm.
blinded, by this guy taking my side. He was for me, and then once in a while, because I always showed up early at his house, I would see his wife looking like her face did not look right.
Mm.
And I was still greet her because I was young, much younger than her. So, I have to show respect. And I'll greet her accordingly. And she wouldn't even answer. She won't be able to talk. And she would just go hide in the room. And it was like, you come out and, hey, Ralph, let's get it. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Got to catch the day, hustle, hustle. And the wife she will not come out. Usually she comes out, we have a conversation, we chat, talk
Mm.
politics and everything. And I love women who can chat like that. And she won't even show
Mm.
up. I never ask myself, why?
Mm.
What's going on? The kids, he'll be like, Raf, can you get the kids ready for school? Oh, sure, sure, why not? I get them dressed up. And, have you guys eaten, everything? Why was that happening? I never knew.
Mm.
Either there was a beating or he had said, I don't know, but there was an abuse going on.
Yeah.
And those were the things which now, looking back, I was like, yes, there were times where I was the type, where my was then I just couldn't recognize. But she had a great career. She was a banker. She was rising up at her profession. So, yeah, she wasn't a weak person. And
Mm-mm.
unfortunately, the person who was like my superstar, the only person who took my side of the family, who stood by my side in the family, he also had a mean streak.
Mhm.
And if the person I am today, if I was that person then, I probably would have been like, uncle, that's a no no. But
Mhm.
where I was then would probably be like, yeah, maybe she said, maybe I would have been looking for or I would have just denied that it happened because I was denying
Yeah.
that it happened. So
Mhm.
it took me years to admit that part of the memory existed because I only talked
Yeah.
about, oh, this guy died, and he was so excellent until he died, but it always flashed. And I think it made sense why after he died, I couldn't bring myself to come to the house anymore.
Mhm.
And some people thought it was because he died and I wasn't benefiting. It's like, oh, my benefactor is gone. That's why I'm not coming to the
Mm.
house. But what if it was the part of me that just couldn't face her? Like I wasn't there for you when you were going through, you know, what
Yeah.
you were going through, and I just never knew how to. I never knew the language. I never knew the words to say. So I just didn't know how to look at her. And I saw her once or twice. I saw her once at our place of work, and she was like, "Why don't you come around?" I didn't know what to say. I don't even know how to deal with grief in the first place. So, because the way I even found out of his death, somebody didn't know I was related to him and just told me. So I was just announcing, this young man died. Oh my God! And and he was saying it in a joking manner, and that's my uncle.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
oh, so there was a whole lot of things that happened, but that was like, but he's still like my favorite uncle. And so every now and then it's something that I think about. Now I'm in a much better place to say yes. I still love him. I
Mhm.
appreciate that he was the first person, the first male figure that really stood by and said, "Don't crucify this boy for challenging someone who said what is wrong." For fact check, I was fact checking older family members before I knew fact check. Like if we just came out and said, "Yeah, in America they allow people to marry animals," I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. But where you get this news from? And oh, how dare you challenge an elderly person? And he was a lawyer. He'd be like, "No, no, no, leave the boy knows what he's talking about. He reads a lot of
Yeah,
news." And yeah, so I love that. No other person stood by me for something like that. But I was being punished
yeah,
for stuff like that. But so it felt great that this man stood by
yeah.
me. But I never knew that he also had skeletons. So
Well, and everybody does. And I
yeah.
think that that's it's again, it just kind of comes back to the human experience. Like,
Hmm.
I think society makes us believe that people can only be one thing, that you can
Yeah.
only, like, whatever, you can only be this side of yourself, but that's just not reality. The reality is that we got all kind of different parts and pieces of ourselves,
True.
because for as much as you love me, right, I guarantee you is somebody out there that hate my damn guts,
True.
right? And not a lot of people, because most, I don't tend to have a lot of negative relationships in my life. I prefer not to. So it may not be a lot of people out there that don't like me, but they do have some that don't like me. And 9 times out of 10, the feeling is mutual. Okay.
Yep.
They probably deserve whatever it was that they got that made them say they don't like me, period. And so, like, people are very complex beings, and it is very possible that somebody can be uh a certain kind of way in one relationship and be another kind of way in another
Another relationship.
relationship.
Yeah.
You're not the same person. The core of you is the same in every, or should be, needs to be the same in every relationship that you're a part of. But you're not the same person at work that you are at home with your family. You're
Hmm.
not the same person at church necessarily as you are when you out hanging out with your homies. And so there's this plurality of us, and as human beings, and we have to allow people to exist in that space and to explore what that looks like. My grandfather was an amazing, amazing man. And, one of the first men that I ever loved. And I mean, I loved my grandfather. My grandfather was good to me. He used to call me your little fat rat. Come here, you little fat rat. That's what he used to call me. Um, and
uh,
I absolutely loved it, but I also understood that he was a difficult husband.
mm-hmm.
That he was that my grandmother's experience of him was very different than my experience of him.
Yeah.
And also my father's experience of his father was very different than
Mm.
my experience of his father. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, we are many things to many people, and we not gonna always get it right. And we have to allow people to be flawed.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we are going to jump forward to, well, not exactly the present, but getting closer to the present. But before we do that, we shall take a quick break. And when we come back, we shall get closer to your creativity. Hi, everyone. We've made it 2 years, and who would have thought so? So let's go further and make it 3, make it 4, make it 5, make it 6. Who knows? 20. But we can't do this without your support. So join us on Patreon at patreon.com/white label American pod or linktree.com/white label American. Go there and you'll see our Patreon link, and you can join us for as low as $3. We have bonus content, we have bonus materials. There's so much juice over there that we don't release to the public, and yeah, you can contribute in making this podcast better. You can send questions, you can send your ideas, and also there's a lot of new things that are coming. The announcements are made on Patreon first, because we have to, take care of people who help make this podcast possible. So you can be the one to make this podcast what you want it to be. Come join us on Patreon and make it what you would like to see. Join us, make it fantastic. Keep the 5 stars coming in, keep the love coming in. Thank you for the privilege of your company. All right.
I like when sometimes the house guests will cook.
Hey, that's my type of
And
house guest.
yeah, he made some cornmeal porridge and it is good.
Cornmeal porridge. Yeah, that the sound alone just sounds about right. That's the kind of stuff.
I never heard of cornmeal porridge until I became Jamaican by marriage.
Yeah, I never heard of cornmeal porridge.
It's
I don't think
good.
I don't think I've had that. No, it's not
It is
something.
good. I like it.
We
I
we
like it a
have
lot.
we have porridges. We have
Yeah.
but mostly bean porridge, yam and beans. Plantain porridge is actually one of my tribal traditional food, which
Mm.
depends on which part of the Ijaw people you meet making it. So if it's like my side, it's more on the reddish with the fish. It all comes with fish, dry fish, stock fish. But if you go
Mm.
closer to the ocean, the Ijaws there have more veggies in there. So I guess the jazz might be more healthier now I think about it. I never thought about it from that point of view.
Right.
uh,
The porridge is one thing that I haven't quite mastered yet, but the rest of the stuff I like. I make really good curry chicken
yeah.
and brown stew chicken and like all of the
I
Jamaican
have to look at
dishes.
the photos of Jamaican porridges if it's similar to ours. I've never checked it. Yeah, because like Cameroonians, I think they also have some porridges there because there's southern Cameroon, which was technically part of Nigeria until independence.
Mm.
Some of their food is very much the same as ours. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of similarities between Jamaica. I think between Jamaica and like the continent,
Oh yeah,
because
obvious. Well,
there oh
for
yeah,
obvious
and
reasons. Yeah.
absolutely. And that's why I think it was the transition wasn't difficult because I mean I pretty much live in a Jamaican household, like we Jamaican up in here. I am very often the only American or non-Jamaican in my house, which I'm all right with. I'm all right with that, because I like Jamaican culture. I appreciated it for the most part. I mean, there's some pieces that I'm like, I'm gonna leave that in Jamaica. We ain't gonna that part right there, we ain't gonna bring that part over here. We gonna leave that in Jamaica. But for the most part,
Yeah.
Jamaica is very much like it agrees with my spirit,
Hmm.
but I think that's also because New Orleans, in the slave trade during that time, New Orleans was one of the few places where Africans were allowed to continue to express certain bits and pieces of their customs,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
and
ask
they had
about
a
that.
market, like they had the market, the French market, and they were allowed to sell their things, and like so they had a little bit more freedom
Oh,
when it comes to expression,
yeah.
and I think that's what has made New Orleans everything that it is today.
Mm. I
Yeah.
think that's the part of New Orleans that I might be a little bit familiar with. in terms of the spirituality and in terms of religion, because it doesn't sound like New Orleans. New Orleans tends to sound different in comparison to most of America that seems to have like just mostly the just one type of Christianity in your face,
Mm,
you know. But New Orleans tends to have different things, and then it's
mhm,
like there's a strong African presence in its
mhm,
religious in its religious space, and that's one reason why New Orleans has always fascinated me, even though I haven't made a trip down there yet. But it's something that's always made it be a place that I've always wanted to come see. And
mhm,
even though I'm no longer religious now, but it's something that I'm like, yeah, I would like to come see it and like meet a voodoo priest there and see like what let me
mhm.
see if a voodoo priest here because I've met voodoo priests in Benin City, which is very, 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 very like strong in voodoo, but you'll still see like Christians and like has like maybe probably a 50-50 Christian Muslim population, but
Mhm.
in the back of their houses you see the shrines.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
tells you who they really believe in, but outside, and in the for the public face, it's like, oh, we go to church or we go to the mosque, and then it's like,
Yeah.
but if money gets stolen in the house or some something or like, oh, someone's accused of cheating, marriage,
Mm.
who we gonna go to? We're gonna go to the shrine. Like there's
Listen.
a serious accusation. Oh, we're gonna go to the shrine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Find out like, oh, there is even into politics. Like you want to swear like we need you know you don't trust your cabinet at local level. Yeah, I don't trust my cabinet. I need loyalty. So before you all, I'm choosing you guys to come serve under me. But before you all serve, before you get sworn in, you're gonna go swear to whichever God I believe in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you backstab me, this is what gonna happen. You die or something like that. Yeah, that gets crazy, and I'm like, yeah. So why can't you just make that religion or that God be a public face? You know, why can't? And it's like, oh no, we are a Christian and Muslim nation. I'm like, are we? So because if we are in the presidential election season now. Next year is the Nigerian presidential election, so it's a big time. Right now, it's the most expensive election in Africa. And yeah, if you come out and say I'm not a Christian or Muslim, sorry, yeah, you lost votes there, right there. That's it. You already lost. You lost.
Well, New Orleans is New Orleans is a Catholic city.
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority, like, people don't always realize that New Orleans is a very Catholic city.
Okay.
Um, but there is also a really big, like, community of uh Yoruba priests and
Mm-hmm.
priestesses
Also, like
and things like that.
Ifa
Yes,
priests and
yes,
priestess.
yes.
Okay.
And I growing up, we always was taught we don't do no voodoo. And I think what people see on TV is not the reality
Yeah.
of what New Orleans is. Like, people on, I don't know who came up with the idea of presenting New Orleans as like this Southern Belle kind of place, because I mean, it is, but it's not at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
or like presenting voodoo as like cutting the heads off of chickens, and like
Even Nollywood does
that's
that a lot too.
I mean, yeah, but that's not it though,
No,
like, it's a
it's not.
real it's a real it's a real worship practice,
Yes.
and it's a real spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I got older, and, Catholicism, for some reason, Catholicism never really set right with me. It's just, I feel like a lot of the teachings don't really make sense to me. But the core of it, I still carry with me to this day. In terms of, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
The golden rule, that's just good advice, like, that's just being a decent person. So like those
Hmm.
kind of things, yes, I definitely carry those things with me. But most of Catholicism never really sat right with me. But as I got older, I started to explore a little bit more and explore my city more on my own terms.
Yeah.
And, just learn about the different customs and learn about these little pockets that I wasn't necessarily exposed to in that way for educational purposes. Like we was exposed to it, but only to the extent of saying stay away from that.
Mm.
And so having an opportunity to explore for educational purposes and really start to understand that, the root of a lot of those spiritual practices, it's been helpful. I can't say that I subscribe to any particular spiritual practice right now.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I'm I I kind of feel like at the end of the day we all talking about the same thing. I just think that we have different ways of expressing what that thing is.
Mm.
And we have different ways of um putting those lessons and those teachings into practice. Ritual is a human thing.
Yes.
Ritual is it comes back to that love and belonging, right? So we have rituals because it helps us to feel a part of a community. And so when you are a part of this community, these are the rituals that you experience. And that's really all, baptism and confirmation and all of those things. That's really
True.
all that is. It's a ritual to say this is the expression of who I am. This is me being a part of this community, and expressing myself in that way. So, but yeah, all of that to say the point that I was making, because the point that I was making is that I'm very grateful that my creative imagination and all of that has allowed me to be open to understanding different points of view,
Mm.
specifically in the area of spirituality.
Oh yeah. And I'm still gonna come down there and explore for educational purposes and for my entertainment too. Because
Uh-huh. And
yeah, I
nutritional.
like to get down there.
Oh yeah.
Well, maybe
Come on
I'll
down.
tell my kid hang out somewhere else. And when you get older, you come down. So, how did you decide what you were going to study when it was time to go to college?
Oh, that's a good question. You have good questions.
I try. I try.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I was going to college because in my household, I didn't know there was an option to not go to college. I didn't know that you could choose to not go to college. It was just all it was the expectation that was set, and I was okay with that. To be honest, I
Hmm.
I was okay with that. Um, but I never really enjoyed school, but I'm pretty good at school. And so I didn't really have a problem with that. I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. But my mother wanted me to be a teacher, and I knew I didn't want to be a teacher in the classroom because I'm in the classroom, at that time, and I'm like, I would slap the shit out of somebody's child. Like for real, my patience is thin when it comes to disrespectful kids. So I knew that wasn't going to be for me, but I read well and I write well. And so I said, okay, I'll be an English major. And so I signed up as an English major and got accepted to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Go Cajuns. And when I went to freshman orientation, at that time, it was actually the last year because I graduated in 2000. I graduated from high school in 2000. And so that was the last year that they used to have the paper, actual paper course catalogs.
Okay.
And so it kind of looked like a newspaper, like, what you would think of as a newspaper.
Yeah.
And it was this big book and it had every course that the university offered. And that was the last semester that they had it that way. The next semester they started doing it digitally,
Okay.
which is how everybody does it now. But anyway, but I had the newspaper, and I was kind of flipping through it to choose my courses, and I came across psychology. And I had never even heard the word psychology before. And so I read, the description for the Department of Psychology, and it said psychology is the study of human behavior. And that immediately drew me in because I have always, always, always been fascinated by human behavior.
Mm.
I didn't know that there was a word for it though.
Yeah.
But I've always been like a people watcher. I'm always been that kind of person that, I would just sit there and watch somebody and I'm like, what made you put that shirt with that pants, Or what was going through your mind when you decided to do the thing that you did that led to the consequences that it like what motivated you? I've always just like, I remember in high school, I went to all girls school. I'm not going to say I was not popular in high school, but um, I was bullied a lot and I was not really a part of like the in crowd.
Okay.
I had my own friends.
Yeah.
And with my friends, I was completely comfortable and the life of the party, so I was popular within my friend group, but my friend group was not like the main group, if that makes sense. Like we
It
were
does.
kind of on the
Yeah.
outskirts,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can't really feel like I never really felt like I was popular, but we all grew. It was a small community. Like I said, I grew up with the same people I grew up with from 3 years old all the way through high school. I had a lot of stability growing up. So it was the same group of people with a couple new faces here and there. And I remember sitting at the lunch table in high school often, and they would be sitting there and they would be talking about all of the things that they did over the weekend that I was not invited to. But we sitting at the lunch table and they talking about it. And I would be sitting there like, it really doesn't bother me that y'all didn't invite me because I wouldn't want to do that anyway. Like,
Mm.
what's wrong with y'all? Why would y'all want to do that? Like, I could not wrap my mind around it. And I always had all these questions in my mind. So I've always been interested in human behavior. I just didn't know it was a thing you could study. And so I started looking at the courses and, like the different descriptions for the courses. So child psychology, abnormal psychology, like all of, and I was like, oh, wow, like this is a whole thing, like this, like I really can learn people. I
Yeah.
really can like learn how to understand people and what motivates people. And so I changed my major to psychology at freshman orientation. And I haven't looked back since. And I always say, um, you know, I didn't really choose psychology. I feel like psychology kind of chose me, like I've always been that person. And that even feeds into my podcasting world now. I use a lot of my skills in therapy, like as a therapist in my podcasting, whether it's asking questions,
Yes.
like knowing how to really dig in there and get the story, like really understand this person, because that's really what the story is. The story is trying to understand the human,
Mm.
and the human experience.
True.
And so being able to ask those questions and pull that information out, but then also being able to understand what's not being said,
Yeah.
to hear what's not being said so that
Mm.
I could know what direction to go in. And so yeah, so that's how I got into psychology. And I just kind of, figured my way out from there as far as career was concerned. But it all of that has led me to podcasting, which is where I really believe I'm supposed to be. So,
Uh, you know, when you gave the example of the kids talking about the all the things they did over the weekend without inviting
mm,
you, it brought a memory. I mean, I've said this before on the podcast of I think it was during my younger adult days, and well, my early days as an adult, and I was with the well, I considered it as part of the crew, but also I moved around a lot in my during my days in Nigeria. So this was now I'm in the city that I identified most with, and in Port Harcourt, and there was this night where two of the boys who I wasn't they weren't the closest to me, but they were part of the crew. It just felt like we were hanging outside this evening, and for some reason, it just felt like whatever they kept talking about, there'll be times where they will include me, and then there will be times where it felt like I was being sidelined from the conversation. I don't know when it started, but there are times where if I start noticing that you include me, and then there are times you try to like start whispering between yourselves, I take myself out of conversations, like I zone out.
mm-hmm,
But I can hear what you're saying, but I will just zone out intentionally. Like, yeah,
mm-hmm,
you don't. I know you're struggling to get me out, so I take myself out. So I literally did
mm-hmm,
that. But I was sitting next to them, so they thought they were whispering and then they were trying, like they were trying really hard. But I wasn't interested. But I knew they were planning to go to a party. They just didn't want me to come
mm-hmm,
with them. So when I noticed that they were still struggling to keep whispering about it, and they were doing a terrible job, so I just was like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna help them. So it's like I just stood up and like, hey, I am go after. Hey, I pretended like I was running after somebody, and I
mm-hmm,
left. So they went to the party with two other guys who they were figuring they will go have a better time with, and on their way back they ran into a police checkpoint, and unfortunately they didn't have the cash needed for the bribery. But I have plenty of Nigerian police stories. How I never got yeah, it's like this. The end SARS protest. As much as I empathize with them, there's a reason why a lot of people in the country were like, "It's now you guys really waking up to this." Yeah, there's stories of what
mm-hmm,
have been happening long time.
mm-hmm,
Uh, yeah. So the let alone the guy driving, he was the only person that had an ID, which was the driver's license. So he was the only one they let go. They took the other three. Like, yo, we'll take you we'll detain you guys. And the guy driving came home, but he was afraid to tell their families what had happened.
mm-hmm,
So he came to me to tell me the next morning. And when he was telling me, it was like, so I just had my head down, shaking my head like the two guys who were trying to cut me out of the conversation didn't want to invite me. I was like, so now they need my help now to raise money to
mm-hmm,
come build them. But at the same time, they don't want to tell their families that, oh, we snuck out to a party, and because
mm-hmm,
so how we going to do this now? For some reason, this guy's afraid to go tell their elder brothers, but he's coming to me, the person you didn't want to invite you and all that. But there were times, a whole lot of other times, stuff like that would happen. But I'm the person they will always run to, and it was just funny how stuff like that would happen, and I was like, ah. But we made it. I talked to the right person. That one started the whole phone calls and all that, and they raised money. When at the end, their dads found out. Their parents went and
mm-hmm,
built them because I was like, it's too much work. I mean, we didn't have that money, so
yeah.
it happened. And yeah, when they came back, they apologized and oh man, we should have invited you. I was like, oh no, you shouldn't. It's good because I would have really said with you getting beat up by
Yes.
yeah. So I'm glad you chose not to invite me and that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I think there were times because we didn't have language for a lot of things, so we didn't know
Yeah.
what was happening. But it was just funny how yeah. But there were days where I would feel like maybe something was wrong with me that they didn't want me at the party, but when they got in trouble, they always run to me like, "Hey, Raf, come, help us. You know how to talk to people." And but I never saw that there was a strength there. I always saw it from the negative. Always like, "Oh, why wasn't I good enough to be invited in the
Mm,
beginning?" So I think later on that will also play a role in my looking down at myself. But it would
mhm,
take a while for me to recognize that, yeah, maybe it was always a good thing that I was never invited to such things, and they would always get in trouble. There was something bad,
mhm.
or someone would get stabbed, or there was something, and I was never there to wait
Yeah.
for when something wrong was just going to happen. It was never a great experience where I was like, oh wow, I wish I was there. I wish I was there. No, no, it was just. But for some reason, I just knew how to take myself out of those conversations. If I just feel like people want to cut me out, like okay, fine, go ahead. I don't need to be a part of the conversation. So
Well, and that I
yeah.
tell people all the time, because it's a lesson that I had to learn in my life, is that you get to choose too.
Yes.
I think we spend a lot of time waiting to be chosen,
Mm.
whether that's chosen by family, chosen by romantic partners, chosen by friends, chosen at work, chosen like we spend so much time waiting for acceptance, which is it, that sense of love and belonging is extremely important, right? It's one of our basic needs, but we get to choose as well. We get to choose which groups we are a part of. We get to choose to create groups
Yeah.
for ourselves. We're not just at the beck and call, or we're not just at the whim of the powers that be and just have to sit back and wait to be chosen. We get to choose as well. And so, what you're describing in essence is I chose that I didn't really need to be a part of what they had going on,
Hmm.
right? Because y'all keep getting in trouble, and I'm not with that. I ain't with that. And if y'all don't want me to be a part of y'all anyway, then that's fine. I choose not to be. I don't need you to decide to put me in your group or to make me a part of whatever it is you have going on. I choose to stop caring about whether or not you want me to be a part of your group, and I
Yeah.
choose to find my own
My
group,
own
which
group.
is what I ultimately did. I didn't have the language for that at the time,
Excuse
but
me.
that is ultimately what I did. I had my own friend group, of which I'm still friends with to this day. Like some of my best friends came from that group of people who accepted me and loved me and allowed me the space that I needed to just be myself, whereas the main group wouldn't allow me to do that. And um so yeah, we get to choose as well. We get to choose to form our own relationships.
That's right. We get to choose. So, talking about choosing, you are also a military spouse. How did that choosing come about? Did you?
Well, so yeah, I'm not a military spouse actually. I met my husband on a military base, but
Okay.
he's not military.
Oh, he's not?
No, no, he's not military. So, my first international assignment was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Oh.
And so in Guantanamo
Uh huh.
Bay, because way back in the day they closed the gates to Cuba,
Yes.
and so that meant that they no longer had access to Cuban workers. And so they now ship in workers from Jamaica and from the Philippines.
Oh.
And so when I
Oh
got there,
yeah, I never thought about that.
yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of
that
people don't
okay.
think
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, that
I
makes
never
that.
thought about it
Yeah,
before
that
I
makes
went
sense. That
there.
makes sense. To be honest, yeah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
I never thought about it
Knowing what
before
I
I
know
went
now,
there.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a huge Jamaican population in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, on the military base, and they
Oh,
make the base run. They work the grocery store, they work the offices, they work the child development center. That was my introduction to Jamaica, was by going to Gitmo, and my husband was there, and he worked in one of the galleys, which is kind of like the cafeteria.
yes.
So he worked at the galley, and I remember I arrived in Gitmo on a Thursday at about 3 p.m. and I met my husband Friday morning.
Wow, that was quick.
Yeah, not even 24 hours. I met him about 11 o'clock the next morning, at the library, because at the time they didn't have, this was 2015. Yeah, 2015. They didn't have like Wi-Fi
Mm-hmm.
on the base. They had like the hotspots, and so you would have to go to a place that had a hotspot that had free Wi-Fi in order to be able to use it. And a lot of the foreign nationals, to communicate with people back home,
Yes.
they would use WhatsApp, which they needed Wi-Fi to use WhatsApp. And so it would be a lot of people just crowded outside of the library. And so I went over there because I needed to submit my timesheet. And my husband was there. He was working night shift at the time. So he had just gotten off work. He was sitting outside with his friend. And he said he saw me get out the car. I didn't really even notice. It was my first day. I was still trying to figure everything out. And my first time leaving the country. I had never left America before.
Wait, but before
Um,
before you continue, what took you to Gitmo?
so I am a therapist by trade, and I used to do military
Okay.
counseling.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and which is kind of like, so there's a program called the Military and Family Life Counselors,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically like a traveling therapist.
Okay.
But we would just travel to military bases. So I would go to different military bases around the world, and I specialize primarily in youth and child and family. But I also did a couple of adult assignments as well. And we would just go and provide like no questions asked therapy for service members and their dependents.
Okay.
Which we were out, so we were contractors, so we were outside of the military system.
Yeah.
And so we were able to just give them more anonymity.
Mm.
Because in the military, you was a Navy man, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the service, um, it's changing more, but mental health can hold up your career
It
in the
does. It
military.
does.
And so a lot of people don't seek the mental health support that they need for fear that it will stunt their career,
True.
or fear of backlash. And so our program allowed them to get the help that they needed without the paper trail.
Mm.
So it
Okay.
wasn't connected to the military.
Yeah.
And so they could get that help, without fear of backlash. So it's a really great program. The program actually still exists all over the world. It's a beautiful program. Um, so yeah, so that's what brought me there. And
Okay.
so here we are. That was in 2015. And so here we are, 7 years later. We got married after about a year and a half. We got married that was January 2015 that we met. We were in a relationship, or like officially in a relationship, on February 15th of
Wow.
2015. And then we got married September 2nd, 2016. And we still together, we
So
still together. I
was the
still
marriage
like you.
over here or in Jamaica?
No, we got married here. We got married in New Orleans.
Okay.
We went because so after I left Gitmo, I went to Japan, and that's when I went to Okinawa. And so when I got back from Okinawa, because he ended up going back to Jamaica. And so I left Okinawa uh, July 31st of 2016.
Yes.
We had already done all his K1 visa paperwork. And so he came to America on August 3rd. And we got married September 2nd and moved to Texas.
Awesome. So, what
Yeah.
was that process like dealing with immigration for you guys?
When I did his paperwork, because I did all of his paperwork
Yeah.
myself, and so it wasn't, it was a smooth process. It wasn't like tumultuous or anything like that. It was just a waiting game, like it's a tedious process, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find that process to be difficult.
Okay.
I read everything, I was all on the internet. I was asking questions and, just making sure that I had the accurate information because that's really what holds up your application a lot of times. But ours was not a complicated case because my husband didn't have any kind of criminal history or anything like that, so it made it a little smoother because there were no red flags
Yeah, and
per
he had
se.
also been in the system working
Yeah,
for DOD. So yeah.
so it made it a little smoother. But my stepdaughter, who's still in Jamaica, we're working on her paperwork for her to come here. And again, the process is not necessarily difficult, but doing this in the time of COVID is kind of
Uh,
insane. And so it's just, again, it's the waiting process. We've
yeah.
been waiting about 6 months, and we got about another year before her appointment. And so
Wow.
I'm trying to do everything I can to get that moved up.
Yeah.
Now that Jamaica is back open, fully open, I'm going to see if I can get that date moved up at all. But the immigration process wasn't necessarily hard. It's just taxing. It's tedious.
It's tedious. Well,
Mhm.
there's one card that we always, recommend is your Congress person. If
Mm.
if it's getting, if it's too long. I always ask about how the immigration process is going for you or for any guest who's on the show that has had to file because everyone has a different story to tell. So yeah,
Mhm.
so I'm glad that it went well, and the tediousness is yeah. I think that's one thing that everybody that's universal for everybody.
Yeah.
The immigration process. Yeah. So um, we're already aware that you're a podcaster. Um, but one thing we haven't officially touched on is when you officially embraced storytelling and other forms of creativity that you have as being a part of you and wanting to use that as a voice to share with the world. So when did that come to be? I think you've given parts of this answer already, but the official answer.
Yeah.
When did it officially happen, and when did you say this is it? I'm going forward with it.
So I'm the kind of person that really, I'm very much into, um my feelings,
Mm.
Like I said, when I used to sit on the stoop with my grandfather, I'm an emotional child,
Yeah,
and I really be needing that connection.
is that a Leo
So
thing?
I don't know if it's a Leo thing. I don't know, but it's a Trees thing,
Yeah,
that's is I'm very connected to other people and to feelings, to my feelings, which is why I have to be really, really particular about who I allow in my world,
true.
because if you're in my world, you're in my world, and I'm connected to you. And for me, that's a big deal. So I when I first started my so all right I go to school. I'm gonna give you the quick version of this because it's a long story, but I enjoy telling this story. My goal had always been to go into private practice, right?
Yeah.
So when I finished school, I went to grad school, finished grad school, got my master's, and I was like, okay, now how do I get into this private practice? I didn't know how to start a business. And at the time, I was feeling like I didn't really have a lot of influences as it relates to entrepreneurship because my understanding of my grandmother as an entrepreneur that didn't come until maybe like the last, I would say maybe like the last 5 to 7 years for me,
Mm.
because I didn't, it took me, I didn't see her as an entrepreneur. I just saw her as the candy lady.
Yeah.
And so I just recently started to understand that you know, I did have an example of what it means to be an entrepreneur in my life. My grandmother was an entrepreneur, but I didn't at that time I didn't have that understanding. And
Mm.
so I was like, how am I going, I'm just trying to figure it out on my own. And so I ended up getting the military contract, right? So I started doing the military counseling. And first I was just doing domestic, so stateside assignments, all different military bases across the country. And then I actually took a break around 2011, 20, I started in 2011. So 2012, I took a break. No, I started in 2012. So 2013, 2014, I took a break from doing the military counseling because I had made enough money to start my private practice. So I got an office in New Orleans in Marrero, and I opened my private practice, and it was everything that I had in my head. It was the vision down to the curtains on the walls,
Yeah.
like it was the vision. And I was so proud of myself. And then I was like, okay, but now I got to figure out how to bring in money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had never worked so hard at anything in my whole entire life. And it failed. It didn't work out. And I ended up having to close my offices, which was earth shattering for
Mm.
me because, like I said before, um, I never really enjoyed school, but I was good at school.
Yeah.
I'm good at a lot of things. I'm the kind of person that I've never really had to try that hard to do anything well. I just It just kind of comes naturally to me. That doesn't mean that I don't struggle. It just means that I struggle on a different level,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
It does.
So I worked harder than I had ever worked for anything in my whole entire life. And I still had to close that office. It was not enough. It just did not work. And that shook me to my core because I don't have to try that hard. And I
Mm.
did try that hard and it didn't work. So in the process of trying to open my office, of trying to get my office off the ground rather and make it profitable, I created a course. It was my first time ever creating a course. And the name of that course was the Empower Hour series. And so I created the course to promote the business. And I started shopping around the course at different churches and stuff, trying to find somebody to let me do it for free at their place. My church supported me and allowed me to do it there. And I went to this meeting and I met this girl who was a publicist, all out the blue. I didn't even know what publicists did. And she said, I'm going to be your publicist. I want to represent you. And I was like, okay. And she ended up getting me a radio interview
Wow.
on FM 98, which is the old school station in New Orleans. And it was a pre-record, it was a teeny tiny little thing, but I was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna be on the radio. Like
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. And so I went in to talk about my course that I had created. And I met with the producer. She actually did the interview. And after, I was so nervous. And after the interview, the producer said to me, "Have you ever thought about going in radio?" And I was like, "Me?" Because I hated my voice. I
Mm.
hated my voice. I thought that my voice was just so irritating. And she was like, "You have a really nice voice." She was like, "You have the kind of voice that like people anywhere would want to listen to your voice." And I was like, I that could not have been further from my mind.
Yeah.
The thought never crossed my mind that I could actually use my voice to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, I hated my voice. And so she got me thinking, because I was like, well, she a producer at FM 98, like she knows what she talking about. And so she got me thinking, and within 3 months, I had my own radio show at WWOZ in New Orleans. Not no, excuse me, not WWOZ, WBOK, which is a black-owned indie radio station. It's a historic radio station in New Orleans, and that only lasted maybe about 4 months or so. It ended very abruptly, but it had nothing to do with me. It was some stuff with the station, and with my producer at the time. But it was enough to, I caught the bug. I got the bug.
Yeah.
It was my first time behind the mic, for real, for real. I learned what it was to produce a show, to put a show together, to think about, like storyboarding and conceptualizing an episode, and how do you maintain a conversation that's entertaining but also informative. Like, I figured all of those things out by producing that show. And so I kind of went on from that. I ended up closing my office, and I went to Cuba. And then when I was in Cuba, a friend of mine called me, and he was like, "You ever heard Amanda Seals' podcast, Small Doses?" And I was like, "First of all, what's a podcast? Never heard, what is that?" I had never heard of that before. And he was like, "You should check it out." He's like, "I think you could do something like that." Because he knew I had my radio show, and
Yeah.
he loved my radio show. And I got so much positive feedback from people about the radio show. So I listened to Amanda Seals' podcast, Small Doses, and I was like, I can do this. I can do this, because I already did the show. It's like radio online. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
basically what it is. That's basically what a podcast is. So I started doing research how to start a podcast, which at the time there wasn't a whole lot of information out there, because podcasting had not blown up like it is now, where everybody and their grandmama is a podcaster now. But at that time it was something that was still kind of fringe,
Yeah.
and so I pieced that information together. I bought me a Logitech headset with the little microphone on the side, like the
Uh-huh.
little little telecommunications thing. It was about $25, and I bought it at the Next. And
Hey, shout out to the
hey,
Knicks.
shout out to the Next. The Next always got them good deals.
I
Okay.
miss the Knicks.
Ooh, let me tell you, I definitely missed the Next. But I bought it at the Next. And I recorded right there in Cuba, in Gitmo, sitting on my sofa.
Wow.
I recorded my first episode, and kind of went on from there. And I think when I really started taking it seriously, like I think I can actually do this, like I could do this for a living, was when I had an opportunity to do my show live for the first time at a Pod Connection ATL. That was in 2018. And I they had like a little contest thing, and I won the contest. And I got an opportunity to perform my show live. It was me and five other shows. One of the shows didn't show up, and so I actually ended up closing out. I was the closer. I was the
Oh,
closer, which is a big deal.
yeah.
And at that event, that's when it really kind of sank into me that, like, okay, this is a thing I can do. Because I had one girl that came up to me and she was like, I just want you to know that I drove here all the way from Alabama just because I wanted to see your show, like just for you.
Wow.
She was like, I came here for you. And I want you to know
Yeah.
that you are the only reason that I came here. And I was just like, oh my God, like that was so cool to me. And then one of the hosts from one of the other shows cause if it's a competition, you listening to everybody's show.
That's right.
You listening to your competition because you want to know what they bring into the table.
Hmm.
And one of the guys, Peabody, shout out to Peabody, Social P, in Houston, Texas. Peabody, he told me, he said, I ain't gonna lie. He said, I know your show for women. He said, but I ain't gonna lie, I be listening to your shit on the way to work in the morning. He was like, you good. And he was just so free
Yeah.
with his opinion of me and my work and how high of a regard he holds for me. And
Mm.
that was a first for me in this podcasting space where he was really like, he actually said, Angela Rye,
Yes.
the Angela Rye had a show out at the time. And he was like, I ain't gonna lie. He said, I be listening to Angela Rye. He was like, but if you put you and Angela Rye up against each other, he was like, I think you got a beat. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was just getting that level of affirmation
That's right.
from
Hmm.
my peers that I went into that feeling like an underdog because I was the only solo podcaster. And I was like, damn, they good. Like they had their stuff together,
Yeah.
like I was very impressed by their productions and feeling like because I was doing everything myself. So I was feeling like I wasn't really up to par. And so to get there and to hear them say multiple times, like, no, like you good at this. Like I really love your shit. Like you're really good. That's when I really started taking it more seriously. And I was like, I think there's something here. I think I can do this, like for real, for real. And I just been, exploring that ever since. And I started my production company, STS Productions. I actually got my articles of incorporation on Tuesday.
Hey,
Yes,
congrats.
thank
Congrats.
you, thank you.
That's what's
And
up.
so I have about 2 or 3 projects that I'm working on right now where I'm just producing. I'm not behind the microphone. I'm behind the scenes
All right
all
now.
together, and I'm really, really enjoying that. So this is where I'm going, and I'm just learning how, because I still have a deep, deep love for human beings and
Yes.
and for mental health. And so I'm figuring out every day more and more how to kind of blend those two things. And I think it's cool because it's really kind of turning into my own style of podcasting. Like when you listen to a STS production, that there's gonna be opportunities for learning.
True.
That I'm a learn something, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
feel something, and I'm probably gonna laugh a couple times as well. Um, and that's the goal for me anyway.
Awesome. Man, I could talk to you all day, but I have to start bringing this down because I could ask you like 50 more questions, but I'll save that for a part two. We gotta do a part two down later
Absolutely.
on. But I can't let you go without asking two more questions.
Go for
Let me
it.
see, which one should I do? Well, before I do, well, okay, I'll ask you the official food question first.
Mm.
So, being that you've been to quite a few number of places,
Mm-hmm.
you are Jamaican by marriage.
Mm-hmm.
What's your go-to number one favorite cuisine?
Oh,
You gotta betray somebody. I know it's all right.
I know it's hard
Yeah,
because
that's why I asked this question.
being from New Orleans is like a food hub.
Yep.
And so there's so much about New Orleans food that I mean it's just you just can't go wrong. Um, but also the food in Japan when I was in Okinawa,
Uh huh.
oh my
Uh,
God.
as soon as you say Okinawa, I was like, oh, yeah. I was going to ask
Listen.
about New Orleans if I had a food question about New Orleans, but I was like, ah, so they said Okinawa. I was like, oh, I got to go to the controversial one. So
Oh yes, there's some good food in Okinawa, and of course Jamaica is Jamaica, and these days I cook Jamaican. I actually just took some curry chicken out the freezer.
yeah.
That so I'm gonna cook some curry chicken today. I cook Jamaican food. That's pretty much all I cook these days is Jamaican food. Um, but I'll say this. I will say that the one thing that each of those places has in common is fish.
Oh, that's true.
And
Okay.
I love a good fish. Let me tell you. Now in America, in New Orleans rather, it's usually catfish.
Uh huh.
But other folks don't be knowing how to cook their catfish because you got to clean that catfish and you got to make sure like you got to really take care of the catfish, in order for it to taste good. So in New Orleans, it's catfish.
Okay.
But in I don't know what kind of fish it is in Okinawa. I'm gonna be honest. But it's good. And in Jamaica it's snapper. And so I think fish would be my go-to. Like when I'm feeling like, I'm hungry, but I don't want nothing too heavy.
Yeah.
I go get me one of them deep fried snappers. Ooh, with some bammy. And listen, some bammy, some escaviche. You can't go wrong with that. But I want the escaviche on the side,
Okay.
because I like the crispiness of the fish,
Uh huh.
which I think is I get that from New Orleans. I like crispy fish, and sometimes that escaviche can make it a little soggy. The juice can make it a little soggy. So I just like the peppers and stuff on the side with my fish and my bammy. That's all day. I mean, that's a home run every single time.
So the fish from Jamaica and New Orleans, do, are they boneless?
No,
Okay.
and no.
Okay.
So in
So
New
you
Orleans,
like Ijaw fish then, my tribal
oh
people's fish,
yes.
because
And
yeah,
let me tell you
I
too, when
don't.
I was in Cuba,
yeah.
one of the parents, because I worked with the kids, and so one of the parents was Ghanaian. And I know that's not the same, but I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
she
I
was
also have
Ghanaian.
Ghanaian blood too. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And so the whole time I was there, she was like, I'm going to cook for you. I'm going to cook for you. And I was like, okay, girl, stop. Don't be threatening me with a good time. If you want to cook for me, you could cook for me. I ain't going to stop you from cooking for me because I had never really had like an authentic African meal. And so she finally did cook for me. She made me some fufu
Okay.
with the peanut soup.
I make peanut soup, but not with fish.
Oh, and so she made the fish on the side. So she cooked a lot of things. So she made the fufu with the peanut soup,
Mm-hmm.
and then she made some it was some kind of like a red gravy. So it was
Oh,
tomato
okay. I
that
know.
she cooked
Shita. So she
down.
made shita for you, but I know the shita she made for you.
Oh, with
Yeah.
the dried shrimp, the dried shrimp that
There are
they
different types of shita. So she made the one that she
oh
made for you. Since it was on the side, yeah, with
mm.
the tomatoes. So she sliced the tomatoes
Yeah.
and
Well, no, she cooked the tomatoes
she cooked
down.
it.
So it's
Okay,
kind of
but it
like a
was
red
oily.
gravy.
Yeah, red gravy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's there's one that they sell on this. It's on the woman. It's mostly women. I mean that do it. There's a fish that they fry
Mm.
and they make the gravy. It's quite spicy, but they're always by the roadside. The last time I had that was just before I left Nigeria to move here.
Mhm.
That with kenke. Ooh, that is yeah. That is
It
yeah. Well,
was
it's like
so
when you get it,
good.
it's like the oil is dripping like from the grape. Oh yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So
Yeah.
I'll say
And then there's a
fish.
shita you
I
can get from Amazon. It's darker red. It's literally
mm,
dry. It feels very much more drier. So like Ghana, Liberia. Ivory Coast, they all have different shitos. So
Mm.
yeah, so like the darker one, you can just eat it with rice, plain. I mean, if you want to use egg, fish, meat, whatever, you prepare it separately. But or you can make it like the one that she made. So there are different shitos that yeah, like
Well, listen, she put that fish up in that sauce with that, and I was just like, "Girl, you done changed my whole life." It was so good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'll say fish. Fish
okay,
is,
fish.
you can't go wrong with fish. All different kinds of fish. Well, I mean, you can go wrong with fish because
Well,
sometimes people be doing
yeah,
too
yeah,
much,
yeah,
but
yeah.
fish don't need a whole lot of help.
Okay. Well, I thought you were going to give a controversial answer, and then I could say, hey, anybody wants to complain? Yeah, I'll just send you to Latrice. But
Yeah.
it didn't work out. That you gave one of the best food answers ever. So, well, she a pro. She a pro. See, that's how you know she's a pro. All right. So the next question: everyone who appears on this podcast is automatically declared a dancer. If you claim you can't dance, you can't shake it down. Well, we stop recording and kick you off
Oh,
the
oh.
podcast. So yeah, now we need you to dance for 1 hour, at least an hour. Don't worry, we won't record and make a video. Don't worry, it's okay. It's safe. It's safe. But we need you to give us at least 3 artists that can keep you dancing for an hour, 3 or 4 artists that can keep you dance for at least an hour. Now, there's a catch. You can't give us most popular names. So since you have New Orleans background, you can give us from New Orleans. You can give us from the places you've been around, Jamaica. But you can't go give us like Bob Marley. Like, come on, that's cheating. You can't go mention Bob
Yeah,
Marley.
yeah.
Come on.
No.
Okay,
I
so
don't usually dance to Bob, but I do. I was actually listening to Taurus Riley when I met my husband.
okay,
I had just discovered Taurus Riley. Well, so my three names, I'm gonna say Big Frida, the Queen Diva. You heard
okay,
me. That's from New
okay.
Orleans. Big Frida, you can't help but move when Frida is the queen of bounce, and bounce music
Yeah,
is
bounce music.
authentically New Orleans.
Yep.
So I grew up listening to that. So I'll say Big Frida the Queen Diva. And then also, you know who I really love? I really like Shinsia, who's a dance hall artist. Well, she's trying to break into pop now. She's trying to kind of expand a little bit, but Shinsia is a Jamaican artist. She
Okay.
started in dance hall and she just had her first like crossover album debut a couple months ago.
All right.
Um and so I love Shinsia. She always gets me moving. She's on heavy rotation on my Spotify playlist. And then I really like as far as, like making me move, making me dance. I really like Chloe Bailey,
Chloe
which I
Bailey.
know is a big name, but Chloe.
The
Um
twins.
well, they're not twins, but yes, that's who you're talking about. I like her vibe, and I like that she's weird and she's nerdy and she's just kind of herself, but she also owns her sexuality. I think people have a hard time wrapping their mind around that.
Of course.
But I see myself in the same way. Like I don't necessarily see myself as someone that is I'm not like my husband laugh at me all the time because he say I don't know how to take pictures good. He's like, "Babe, you got to take a sexy picture." And I'm like, "I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to take sexy pictures and be sexy and be a sex kitten, but I do think that I'm a sexy person,
There you go.
because I just think it's a part of who I am. And I love that about her as well, though she knows how to take a sexy picture. But I like her music. I like the levity of it. And I like that, she owns herself. And I also like that who she is outside of her music
Yeah.
is authentic to herself. And because I think that, as I get deeper into this podcasting thing and like exploring my creativity, my second show, my current show, Stories All Around Us, the format, the feel is completely different than my first show was, which was
Mm.
Unicorns Talk Podcast.
Mhm.
And that's you know, it's a thing. Like it's a lot of times people get in one format and they stick to that format. And so but I want to be able to explore all of the different parts of myself, and I want to be able to express that in whatever way that I can. And so I love that about her. And not for nothing, but she makes a bop. I like her music. It's some good dancing music. So that's my three. That's
All
my
righty.
three.
Excellent three. So, final question. What would you like to leave the audience with? It's your freestyle moment. Drop it.
Yeah. Well, so I would just say, my one piece of advice, which is the biggest lesson that I ever learned, and I'm still learning, in this life, because I have to remind myself often, is to just trust yourself. Trust yourself and trust your own gut instincts. The way I look at it, we talked about spirituality earlier, and the way I looked at it is, you don't get a gut instinct about everything.
Mm,
You don't wake up in the morning and get a gut instinct about brushing your teeth, or
true.
get a gut instinct about, whatever. Like you don't get a gut instinct about everything. So when you feel that little something, something going on in your stomach, or you feel a little shortness of breath in that moment when you're thinking about this particular thing, or thinking about maybe doing something, or you hesitate or whatever, pay attention to that, because I believe that that's how the universe communicates with us, or whatever higher power you believe in, whatever entity or entities you consult with in your life. That is how they communicate to us, and kind of guide us, along the right path. And so I think trusting ourselves, is just one of the most important lessons that we can learn, and it is a lesson that we have to learn, because for many of us, the majority of us, we are taught to not trust ourselves.
Mm,
We
that's
are
right.
taught to second guess ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it has, the implications of that are very far reaching. And so I am learning how to trust myself. I'm doing a much better job of it than I used to, but I'm still learning. And that's always my number one piece of advice, to anybody, is to be intentional about practicing trusting yourself, because you will never steer yourself in the wrong direction. I'm not saying it's always going to be easy, and I'm not saying that is, never going to be difficult. But what I'm saying is, when you move based on your gut instinct,
Yeah.
you'll never move in the wrong direction.
Mm. All right. Thank you very much for coming on the show. One last thing before we call it a wrap up. Please plug yourself in and let people know where to find you. Oh, and I forgot to give a shout out to Afros and Audios. That was the platform where I first saw Latrice. That was
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, and I was like, "Who's this woman? I need to have this woman in my life. I need to follow this woman. I'll become a disciple." But I was afraid. I typed an email then, like, "Oh," and then I was like, "Nah, I don't know." I was afraid to hit send, so I never. And then it was probably like what 3 years later, I finally sent the email and said, "Would you like to come on the show?" So, but
Yeah.
thank you, Afros and Audios, for bringing Latrice Sampson Richards into my life. So
Oh.
please plug yourself in and let people know where to find you, and plug your podcast in too.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely shout out to Afros and Audio. Because it's been amazing to be a part of the Afros and Audio team, and just that has expanded my mind so much as well. So shout out to Afros and Audio and Talib and everything. So I be around. You can find me I am on Instagram at Latrice Sampson Richards, but I'm not gonna lie, social media is not really my thing. I post from time to time. I always post. The majority of my posts are gonna be about like things that I have going on. So like when this episode comes out, hopefully you'll send me a graphic and then I'll try to get that posted. Like, so if you want to
I
know
will.
what's going on with me, where, like, if I'm speaking somewhere, if I'm doing something special, then definitely follow me on Instagram. Every now and then I'll show y'all a little glimpse of my life, but social media is just not, it's not my ministry. And so, I do what I can. I'm not on Twitter because Twitter.
Yeah, it's
And
okay.
I mean, I can't take Twitter. I be in my feelings
it's
too much, I can't
yeah.
do Twitter. But yeah, you can find me there. You can go to my website if you want to work with me. You can go to my website. I'm in the process of updating my website, but you can definitely go there and find out more information about me. It's latricesampsonrichards.com. And that's about it. That's where you can find me out here in these internet streets. My current show is called Stories All Around Us. It is an autobiography of the Black experience. I'm very, very proud of it. We release episodes every other week. And we have 3 more episodes left to go. And so we have an episode coming out on this Monday, actually. So we have 3 more episodes left in season 1. And it has been a labor of love. I love this show so
I
much.
love it too. I listen to it.
You like
Fantastic.
it?
I love it. Not like
Yay.
I
You
love
love
it.
it?
I love it. I
Oh,
just I just need to
thank
go
you.
put on my 5 stars. I have some Apple messed up. That's something I'm working with Apple. I don't know.
Yes,
So
please rate and
my 5 stars
subscribe.
is yeah. I can't give 5 stars immediately, but it's something with my Apple account. I don't know when. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. Whenever you get that figured out, we would definitely appreciate it. This show was kind of my introduction to the industry as a podcast producer.
Yeah.
And so I'm very, very, very proud of this body of work, and it's been received very well, and I just hope that it continues to be received well. And yeah, and then my first show is Unicorns Talk podcast. You can find that wherever podcasts are available. That's where I learned how to podcast. So people still listen to it as well. So y'all check it out.
Alrighty. So check all the podcasts out. Don't forget 5 stars. Leave positive reviews and keep the support and love coming in. So once again, thank you, as my people say, Umbana, for coming on the show. Looking forward to having you again on this podcast. And to everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your company. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoy the show, we'll appreciate if you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you have any questions, comments, or have someone who will be a good guest on the show, or you want to be on the show, send us a message at whitelabelamerican@gmail.com. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at White Label American. Thank you for your support.